Hello, class. Welcome. You have studied the kidney. You have studied the functioning, the anatomy. Now, this chapter is related, fluid and electrolytes, because, of course, the kidney is the most important organ in controlling your fluid levels and your electrolytes. So, good stuff. And remember, electrolyte is an ion that's dissolved. If you dissolve sugar in water, it does dissolve, but it just turns into monosaccharides. It doesn't actually break down the molecule into two charged ions. So there's the difference there. All right, let's get to it. So it's all about balance. And it was just absolutely amazing that no matter how much you drink or how little you drink, you are going to pee out or sweat out that same amount every day. And you're able to control this. Just amazing. Electrolytes are always kept within a narrow range. Your pH of your blood is always between 7.35 and 7.45. Everything, magnesium, calcite, phosphates, sulfates, everything is homeostatically controlled to keep in these narrow ranges that are suitable for life. We'll see. We get out of our pH or our calcium levels get out of whack, we die. I mean, you need to have the right internal environment. And balance is the key. Whatever you take in, you need to get rid of. So they keep it balanced. If you take in calcium and don't get rid of the same amount, even though it's a slightly less amount, you'll end up building up calcium day after day and there'll be an issue. So just one example, but so everything, you keep this balance, this equilibrium. Just a beautiful thing. And we're talking about water and electrolytes. They are intimately connected because you're talking about concentration of electrolytes. Well, if you remove water, they become more concentrated. You add water, less concentrated. So electrolytes are dissolved in water. Remember, water is a polar molecule, surround them. And so water and electrolytes always tied together. Yeah, there's a definition of electrolyte. So it's going to dissolve. And if it dissolves and gives out hydrogen ions, it's an acid, right? Hydroxyl ions, it's a base. So it's another thing we'll get to. So where are these fluids in your body? They are not evenly distributed. We'll see blood is like 92% water. I believe muscles are like 75% water, right? Bones are in the 20% water. So, and then what the compartments they're in, like how much is in the cells, how much is around the cells, the water that's in your eyeballs or in the fluids in your joints, how does this water distributed in your body? So we'll get to that first. So you guys, on average, about 60% water, but a difference. Males, says here 63%, women 52% on average, and it's all about women have more adipose tissue on average and men more muscle tissue on average. So muscle holds a lot more water than fat does. Water and fat don't mix, so there's less water and fat. So that's where that comes from, but everyone is different and there's an overlap there. So some women have higher percentage of water than men and some don't. So, but on average, because of the difference in fat and muscle, you have this overall sex difference. About 40 liters of water. And so when you look at our trillions of cells, it turns out about 2/3 of the water is in those cells, and about 1/3 of the water is around the cells. Okay, you can look at this graphic here to help you kind of visualize. Okay, where's the water? Most of it is in my cells, but then see 37% is washing around it. Interesting, as we grow up, the percentage water changes. So you can see old people kind of like raisins, a little, I mean that in the best possible way. I love raisins. But you can see they're more dried out, they have less water. And then if you look at a fetus here, that is mostly water. So as we get older, and I also mentioned, keep talking about cartilage turns into bone as we get older. That's contribute a small part of it. But definitely see a cool difference there and how much we're made out of water as we grow up. Another graphic here, so you can see this. So you can see some 60-some% of the water is found inside the cells, all your cells. We call it intracellular. Extracellular will be outside the cells. You can see plasma. Of course, your blood the 5 liters on average of blood that makes you up. Remember, half of that is plasma and most of that is water. So lots held there. And then remember, all the water in your lymph vessels that are traveling back to your blood. But in the meantime, that lymph is going to make up a small percentage of your water. And then you'll see transcellular, and that just means that the water is held in compartments that are membrane bound by epithelial tissue. And some examples, your cerebrospinal fluid. We talked about how much you made and it goes on your brain and spinal cord, right? It's a watery fluid. In your eyeballs, the aqueous humor in the front. Remember, the vitreous humor is like jelly in the back of the eyeball, mostly water. Yeah. Your joints, that synovial fluid, you don't notice it normally because it's a little bit of lubricating fluid unless it builds up. And then remember, in your pleural cavities, that thin film of fluid that keep it stuck together. So all the serous membranes that secrete fluid around your heart and around all of your guts too, is this small amount of fluid that's found there. So these are all transcellular, like in compartments that have epithelial tissue. In terms of composition, one thing you just absolutely have to know that you should know is that outside of cells, see the purple, sodium, super concentrated. Inside of cells, potassium. That's the big, big difference there between those two. And you know why. You know exactly why. Remember the nervous system, the neurons, you've got that pump, the sodium-potassium pump that pumps out 3 sodiums for every 2 potassiums coming in. So just give them a little bit of time, thousands of these pumps. You're going to have sodium on the outside of the cell, potassium concentrated on the inside. So you set up that gradient. The others, again, I'm not going to ask you details. I mean, it's true about magnesium and chloride. See, it's true. Yeah, there are differences. There's more proteins inside of cells. Yeah. All right. So what determines this movement between the different compartments we're talking about here? Well, we've talked about some of these in some detail. For instance, it's that hydrostatic pressure, that blood pressure, that pushes the water out from the capillaries. We just talked about it in the kidney too. And then, on the other end of the capillary bed, osmosis sucks it in. So those are the 2 big factors. There is a hydrostatic pressure. Any kind of pressure differences are going to, across some kind of membrane, are going to move it from high to low pressure. And then osmosis, the osmotic pressure, has to do with the number of dissolved substances in the solvent. And water is always going to move from places that are more watery to places that are saltier or have more stuff in them. So water is going to move on its concentration gradient. And that's called osmosis, when it goes against a membrane that is not permeable to everything, but it is to water. Anyway, I just described diffusion and osmosis, which you guys learned general biology 100 times. But look at how does this work in your body. You can see, I talked about that. Hydrostatic pressure pushes the blood out of the capillaries. And then osmosis sucks it back. Hopefully, if you've got a lot of stuff in there. Remember, you can be protein deficient and then, or starving. You don't make enough proteins, and then you're going to have, water's going to build up because it doesn't get sucked back. But normally, most of the water gets sucked back. But the pressure will push some excess water into the lymph vessels. And the lymph vessels will slowly return it back to your blood, right? If all goes well. And then looking the hydrostatic pressure between the cells in their environment or between compartments is usually the same, but osmosis will change that quite a bit. So if you guys get real dehydrated, you'll see that the saltiness outside the cells is going to build up, and the water will be sucked out of the cells, and the cells will shrink. And if you overdo it with the water, it becomes more watery outside the cells, and the water will rush into the cells, swelling the cells, right? Basic osmosis. So normally we're talking about within the cells and the extracellular environment, it's osmosis. There's not a big hydrostatic pressure, but the hydrostatic pressure comes in because of your blood pressure, pushes out of the capillaries, pushes into lymph vessels. Yes, so it's all about balance. As I told you, we'll talk about intake and outtake. Where does the water output? Where does the water come in? Where does it leave? It's got to be the same, right? You guys realize that, right? In a day, if you started accumulating just a thimbleful of water extra, over time you would blow up, right? So you have to have this perfect balance. And look at some of the functions of water. Obviously, I mean, they carry around on the blood plasma, they carry your nutrients, the hormones. They have to do with your sweating to control your heat, cooling of your body, lubricating the joints. I see that, yeah, definitely. And then, water is formed when you burn sugar, right? Remember, electron transport chain, and then oxygen will turn to H2O. Yeah. All right, let's talk about it. Water intake. Where do you get the most water? And everyone's different. This is an average, but you can see drinking. It doesn't have to be water. Again, Coke, tequila, coffee, anything that's going to have water in it will add water. Bam. So look at it, 60%. It's like 30% from moist foods, depending on how much Jello and oatmeal you eat, things that are moist instead of just something is dry. And then this 10% looking at water metabolism. That's because you form water, like I say, when you burn sugars. You just simply, water is the last product. And for some desert rodents, they sometimes don't drink at all. They get like almost all their water from the seeds that they eat, and then they break down the carbs and water is released. So all these things are averages. For a human in a normal environment, about 60% drinking, 30% from your moist foods, and 10% just from metabolic reactions that give off water. Yep. Average water intake, we're talking about 2.5 liters. Yeah, remember we talked about how much you pee. I talked about anywhere from 0.5 liter to 2.5 liters, something like that. Yeah. Ooh, now we'll talk about where you get rid of water. So you say to yourself, how much water would I have to lose in my body? How dehydrated before I felt thirsty? And it's amazing that we're talking about just 1%, just a little bit. Do you guys remember what percentage of water you can lose before you're on death's door? It's from an earlier PowerPoint, like 12%. So you lose 10, 11, 12, you're in serious dehydration and low blood pressure and lots of problems. But as little as 1%, you're low on water. Your hypothalamus, there'll be cells there that when you're dehydrated, the water concentration in your body gets less and less, and it's going to suck the water out of the cells by osmosis. The cells are going to shrink like a raisin, and then they will give off signals from your hypothalamus to your posterior pituitary to release ADH. And then antidiuretic hormone is going to travel to your kidneys and make sure that they don't waste any water, they retain the water. And also your hypothalamus is a location for hunger and thirst, so it's going to make you thirsty. So you're going to start craving and seeking out water sources, your body's evolutionary way to keep you alive. And then this is fascinating too. I love this. This is like the earlier discussion, not really discussion, I'm actually just talking to you. We talked about when your oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, when you go exercise, you jump on that treadmill, and it's just the movement of your joints and muscles that increase your breathing rate. So you don't really see a dip in carbon dioxide. I mean, a dip in oxygen and a spike in carbon dioxide when you exercise it, because your body kind of pre-warms up and gets ready because it knows it's going to have that need. Well, here with drinking, if you were thirsty and then you gulped a bunch of water and you waited for that water to be absorbed and make it all the way to your brain, you would drink too much water. You would go too far. So it's just the fact of drinking, when that water distends your stomach, it inhibits this thirst reflex, so that you don't have these wild ups and downs, or you drink too much water, then you come back down again. So it's when you're thirsty, you drink some liquid, and then that act of drinking will stop you. So you don't keep drinking until your brain feels hydrated, or else you would have gone too far and it'd be these wild swings. So that's pretty cool. Where do we lose our water? Let's think about it. Pee, urine, number one. So that's the way we can get rid of excess water, and we're actually kind of stuck having to use water to get rid of our waste. So we always use most of our water there. And then feces and waste is going to be moist coming out. It's going to have, and this can be huge when you have like cholera, diarrhea diseases. You can lose a lot of your water that way. But normally it's, I can see, less than 10%. And then sweating. And this, of course, varies big time. I mean, if you exercise and it's hot out or not. And so, again, all these things are averages, but everyone's a little different. Oh, and a big one here. You don't think about this until you breathe on a mirror and you see that condensation. So your lungs, every time you breathe, that moisture is going to come out and you're going to lose that. So we're always leaking water with every breath because we've warmed and moistened it in our bodies. Yeah. And that you can't really control, right? You can control how much you sweat and even control how much you pee. With time, you can do that, but not, you can't breathe out less moisture. It's just always a waste of water. Yes, so what can you control the most here? Let's see. You guys think about it. I told you already, it's not the breathing. Sweating, feces, or urine. Turns out, yeah, urine. With your kidneys, you can produce dilute urine to get rid of water or very dark, concentrated urine to conserve water. So that's the one you can control. Sweating, you can see that's the problem with heat stroke, is that if you're severely dehydrated, that water, you can't waste it on cooling off and sweating. And so people with heat stroke often get dry skin. They're not sweating and they're way hot. And so that can be a problem. So your body has to prioritize things, and you need water levels to keep your blood pressure up. And sometimes things like sweating have to be the cost of that. Yeah, beautiful. Take a look at this. You see what happens. This is a great chart. Just shows you when you're dehydrated, what happens. I'm not going to explain it again, but EDH will help, and osmosis will shrink those cells in your hypothalamus. Beautiful. Too much water, well, then ADH will be inhibited. Less of it will be secreted, definitely. And then you will therefore pour out watery urine, and you'll get rid of it that way. Electrolytes. How do we take those in? How do we lose them? And I think a lot of you athletes, first thing you're thinking is, oh, well, when you sweat, you lose electrolytes. That's why I drink an energy drink instead of just pure water. You're exactly right. That's one method. But again, sweating, as you're going to see, is not the major way we get rid of electrolytes. Again, it's with our urine, with our pee. How much calcium, how much sodium is it going to be in our urine? That's going to be a little bigger than the perspiration. But sweating, definitely. You feel the saltiness to your sweaty skin. You're getting rid of sodium ions and other ions that way too. And then you lose it in your waste as well. But urine would be the big one. And where do we get our electrolytes? Well, from our diets, right? Our food and drink. And then also in metabolism, and these I can't say these equations, but these chemical reactions that happen, you're going to have bicarbonate, ions are going to form that way too. But all our foods, eat a banana's got potassium in it, right? Drink some milk's got calcium in it. So coming from our food and drink is our input. So what are the important electrolytes? I think you guys recognize these, right? You recognize, you see sodium and chloride. That's the most common one. That's in your salt, right? Potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphates, hydrogen ions, has to do with your acidity as well. We talked about bicarbonate ions with the respiratory system, right? Carbon dioxide binds with water, turns into carbonic acid, which will dissociate into bicarbonate ions. That's wicked important. Yeah. And we bring these into our body. There's got to be an input through our diet and liquid. So normally, if you eat a normal diet, you're going to get these electrolytes. But and there's cases where people have a deficiency and they will crave salty foods. So you have evolutionary software built into you so that you will search out these salty foods. And that's why you put out a salt lick for deer or cattle like salt. They lick it. Moose lick the salt they lick because those electrolytes, we have certain receptors on our tongue, remember, that notice that. So much like we like sweet things for their calories, we like the electrolytes, the sodium, because our body needs lots of sodium. And it's a way to reward us or tell us that we're getting that in our diet. Yeah, and then the output, again, greatest output, just remember, your kidneys get rid of the most electrolytes, period. But sweating also, on your sweat, will be a way to get electrolytes. You need to replenish those. I just throw this in here because I think you guys are interested in these kind of things. These sport drinks, this is, I just happened to stumble upon this. So you look at this one, this Powerade, saying it's the complete sports drink, right? And so they're talking about sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. That's cool. Well, why are they touting complete? Well, they're trying to trash on, that's got to be Gatorade over there, saying that it's incomplete. Notice that. But I want you guys are college educated, getting there, and smart. And so advertising, always question. And if you look at it, you can see for both sodium, potassium, oh yeah, you can see they're both kind of comparable, these two electrolyte drinks. But then you can see that the Powerade is touting that it also has calcium and magnesium that the Gatorade doesn't. But look at this. In water, you've got more calcium than you do in this drink. So, and it's about the same magnesium. So although they're trying to sell it by saying that the one doesn't have these two ions, realize in real life, it's so abundant that it's not an issue, right? That the sodium and potassium need to be replaced. All right, there's a little aside for you guys. So these electrolytes, again, the big one, you can see sodium makes up most of your cations or positively charged ions, right? But so we talked about sodium, potassium pumps. Remember the nerve conduction, how important that is, where the sodium, potassium channels open up quickly. So getting the idea how important that is. And then calcium, remember muscle contraction we did? The sarcoplasmic reticulum held calcium ions, and that is what allowed muscle contraction to happen. So these things that you've heard a lot about, now we'll talk about regulating them and how important they are. So without them, if they get out of whack, your potassium goes way up. Your heart will stop. I mean, that cardiac muscle has got to be just right, the concentration around it. Or too low, your heart will stop too. So these things have got to be kept at a beautiful, narrow range. So let's go through some of these, just as a review here. But let's say you have low sodium levels. Sodium levels are dropping. You haven't had your salt lick for a while, right? So what happens? Well, you know that your kidneys, when they notice less sodium in the tubular fluid, meaning you can have low blood pressure as well, that it can secrete renin. And renin is going to make you make angiotensin, right? And that's going to do a whole bunch of things, make you thirsty. Also have you secrete aldosterone. So aldosterone is secreted from the cortex of the adrenal glands, and it's going to work on the kidney tubes. You need to know aldosterone makes the kidney tubes reabsorb more sodium or keep more sodium to help you raise your sodium levels. So it does this at the distal tube and down the collecting duct. It's going to say, dude, take back more sodium. We're low on sodium. So that's what aldosterone does. Now, as a byproduct, whenever you take back sodium or salt, you also retain water. So it's also going to increase your blood pressure as well. So aldosterone works on the kidney tubules. It's going to increase your sodium in your body, and that is going to, bring you back to homeostasis, and it's going to go back and inhibit that. Like, okay, we're good. Now, one thing here, since it's here, I don't want to just ignore it. Sodium and potassium, those two are intimately linked only because of that sodium-potassium pump. So whenever you take back more sodium, that pump is going to get rid of potassium. And so sodium, potassium, I want you to know that they're linked, and that when one goes up, the other goes down. Let's look at another one. Now in this case, you have your heart is being stretched, which means it's got too much blood pressure. There's too much fluid, and it gives off this ANP, this hormone given off by the heart, the atria. And what's that going to do to decrease your blood pressure overall? Well, there's many different ways it can go at it. Start anywhere. One thing, that aldosterone will be inhibited. Therefore, your kidneys will not take back more salt. Therefore, they won't retain water, and it lets the salt in the water be peed out, lowering your blood volume, lowering your blood pressure. It's also going to inhibit ADH. ADH is what makes you retain water because it opens those aquapores, right? And especially in that collecting duct. And so if you keep those closed, you're going to pee out more water, thus blood pressure dropping. And then also, right at the kidneys of the juxtaglomerular apparatus, it's going to decrease your renin secretion, which would mean less angiotensin 2, and thus all these things that make your blood pressure not go up. So here, your heart released a hormone, and it worked mainly at your kidneys, but sometimes also by dilating vessels, everything it can to have your blood pressure come back down. And remember, when you retain salt, you retain water, more blood volume means higher blood pressure. So anything that makes you get rid of water, either by not holding on to the salt, water will follow it. Yeah, these are called diuretics, are things that make you, drugs that make you pee more. An antidiuretic hormone makes you retain your water, right? So anything diuretic means get rid of water. And lastly, let's look at calcium. So calcium is critical for many things, as you know, your bones, your teeth, but for muscle contraction, your heart, and all your muscles. So you need calcium levels to be just right. And you all know the two hormones. Let's think back to the endocrine system. What are the two hormones that influence calcium levels? One of them's right here. Parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. So if you were to have low calcium levels, it will be noted in your parathyroid glands. They are monitoring your blood, and they will release parathyroid hormone. What's that going to do? It has a three-pronged approach, really. Parathyroid hormone is going to stimulate your osteoclasts to break down bone, and it's going to release calcium into your bloodstream. It's going to tell you to absorb more calcium from your diet, and that's done, a lot of this is through vitamin D. So parathyroid hormone is going to make vitamin D into its active form done in the kidneys. And then thirdly, your kidneys themselves will be told to hold on to the calcium and don't let you pee it out. So make the bones get rid of calcium, because the bones are storing it for you. Make your intestines absorb more from your diet, and then make your kidneys hold on to it and not pee it out as much. All those things will raise your calcium levels. Yep. And as negative feedback, so as calcium gets back to normal, parathyroid hormones are going to drop. And then when calcium levels drop again, parathyroid is released. So you have this back and forth.